Throw her out. She's lying. The accusation exploded across the Santoro family dining hall with such force that every conversation died mid-sentence. Bianca Santoro slammed a thick folder of photographs onto the polished oak table, her perfectly manicured hand trembling with triumph. "There," she declared, "your beloved mafia boss's wife is nothing but a paid actress." Half the family rose from their chairs. Several capos instinctively reached beneath their jackets. Every eye shifted toward Gabriel Santoro, waiting for him to end the humiliation with a single sentence. Instead, he calmly slipped an arm around the curvy woman beside him, drew her a little closer, and said in an almost bored voice, "Careful." A dangerous silence followed. "You're insulting my wife." Only Hazel Montgomery knew the terrifying truth. She and Gabriel had met less than 48 hours earlier. 3 days earlier, Hazel Montgomery believed there were exactly 3 kinds of disasters: burning sugar, forgetting to add butter, and opening her bakery's bank account every Monday morning. Unfortunately, Monday had arrived. She stared at the screen of her aging laptop while standing behind the counter of Montgomery's bakery, a tiny corner shop tucked between a laundromat and a flower store that always smelled faintly of cinnamon. The balance displayed on the screen looked more like a cruel joke than a business account. Rent was overdue. The commercial oven needed repairs. Her flour supplier had politely reminded her, for the 3rd time, that invoices could not be paid with apology muffins. Hazel sighed. Well, she looked toward the display case. At least the croissants came out pretty. The bakery itself reflected its owner. Warm, bright, slightly chaotic. Every shelf was decorated with handwritten signs because Hazel insisted printed labels felt too unfriendly. Customers adored the place. Children pressed their noses against the glass to admire colorful cupcakes. Retired couples stopped by every Tuesday because Hazel remembered exactly how much cinnamon Mr. Carter liked in his apple pie. Office workers often arrived, exhausted, and somehow left smiling after Hazel insisted they take an extra cookie for emotional support. The problem wasn't love. The bakery had plenty of that. Love simply didn't pay utility bills. Hazel wiped flour from her apron before pulling another tray of pastries from the oven. The comforting aroma filled the room. She closed her eyes for just a second. This bakery had belonged to her parents before it became hers. Every wall held memories. Every recipe carried someone's laughter. She had promised herself she would never lose it. A small bell chimed above the entrance. Without looking up, Hazel smiled. "Good morning. Your usual blueberry scone is almost—" The words stopped. The man standing in the doorway clearly wasn't there for breakfast. His charcoal gray suit probably cost more than Hazel's annual income. His shoes reflected the bakery lights like polished mirrors. Everything about him screamed expensive. Everything except the expression on his face. He looked as though smiling required legal authorization. "Miss Hazel Montgomery?" She blinked. "Yes?" The man produced a leather business card. "My name is Adrian Wells. I'm an attorney representing a private client." Hazel immediately checked the calendar in her head. No unpaid parking tickets. No lawsuits. No forgotten taxes. Unless accidentally overfeeding neighborhood pigeons had become a crime overnight. "I'm afraid you've caught me completely unprepared," she admitted. "If this is about emotional support cookies, I can explain." For the first time, one corner of Adrian's mouth twitched. "I assure you, Miss Montgomery, it is considerably stranger than that." He placed a sealed envelope on the counter. "I have a business proposal." Hazel glanced at the envelope suspiciously. "It isn't one of those pyramid schemes, is it?" "No." "Timeshare?" "No." "Reality television?" "No." She relaxed slightly. "Good. I cry too easily for reality television." Adrian slid the envelope toward her. "Please read page 3. Hazel opened it. The first 2 pages were dense with legal language she barely understood. Page 3 contained only 1 number. She stared. Read it again. Then flipped the page upside down. There are. She swallowed. Too many zeros. The amount is correct. Hazel laughed. Not politely. Not nervously. She laughed so hard she had to lean against the counter. Oh, this is excellent. Whoever planned this prank deserves an award. Adrian waited patiently. After nearly a minute, Hazel noticed he still hadn't smiled. You're serious? I am. She slowly lowered the contract. What exactly would I have to do? The attorney folded his hands. You would accompany my client to a private family gathering. For 1 weekend. In the role of his wife. Silence. Hazel blinked once. Twice. Then pointed toward herself. The flour-covered baker. Correct. The pretend wife. Correct. For 1 weekend? Correct. She looked toward the kitchen, then back at Adrian. I'm going to need considerably stronger coffee. Adrian waited while she brewed an entire fresh pot. Only after her 2nd cup did she ask the obvious question. Who is your client? The attorney hesitated. Just long enough for Hazel to notice. Then he quietly answered. Gabriel Santoro. The coffee mug slipped from Hazel's fingers. Fortunately, it landed inside the sink. Unfortunately, she nearly followed it. Everyone in the city knew the name. No newspaper printed it loudly. No television station discussed it openly, but everyone knew. Construction companies, shipping ports, luxury hotels, political fundraisers. The Santoro name somehow appeared behind all of them. People called Gabriel Santoro many things. Business genius, kingmaker, the most dangerous man in the city. Hazel whispered, That Gabriel Santoro? Yes. She stared at Adrian as though waiting for hidden cameras to appear. I think, she said carefully, your client has mistaken me for literally anyone else. Adrian calmly removed another document. It contained photographs. Hazel serving children cupcakes. Hazel comforting an elderly customer. Hazel dancing with neighborhood kids during a charity festival while wearing a ridiculous chef hat shaped like a strawberry. You weren't selected by accident. My client required someone kind. Hazel frowned. Kind? Not glamorous? Not sophisticated? Not experienced at pretending? Adrian shook his head. He specifically rejected all professional candidates. He requested someone genuine. Hazel looked down at the contract again. Enough money to erase every debt. Repair every oven. Replace every appliance. Save the bakery her parents had built. Her heart pounded. Everything about the offer screamed that she should run. Immediately. Very fast. Preferably to another country. But every glance around the little bakery reminded her why she couldn't. Finally, she whispered, What happens if I say yes? Adrian closed the folder. My client will arrive tomorrow morning. He prefers discussing impossible decisions in person. Hazel groaned. I already dislike him. Adrian almost smiled again. So does everyone. The following morning, Hazel stood outside a glass and steel office tower that looked as though it had never known the existence of flour, butter, or happiness. She adjusted the strap of her worn canvas bag and glanced down at the address for what felt like the 20th time. This has to be the place, she muttered. It certainly doesn't look like somewhere people eat cinnamon rolls. Before she could convince herself to leave, the enormous glass doors slid open. A receptionist greeted her by name before she even spoke. Miss Montgomery, Mr. Santoro is expecting you. Hazel's stomach immediately tightened. Of course he was. People like Gabriel Santoro probably expected everything. The private elevator carried her silently to the top floor. There was no music, no advertisements, no chatter, only the faint hum of machinery and the realization that she had never been anywhere this expensive. When the elevator doors opened, she found herself facing a pair of bodyguards. Neither smiled, neither blinked very much. One opened an office door. "Miss Montgomery." She stepped inside. The room was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked nearly the entire city. Shelves of leather-bound books lined one wall. A massive desk occupied another. Standing beside the windows, his hands tucked into his pockets, was Gabriel Santoro. He was taller than she'd imagined. His charcoal suit fit perfectly, without appearing tailored. Dark hair, calm expression, eyes that somehow looked both exhausted and completely alert. He turned as she entered. Neither spoke for several seconds. Hazel broke the silence first. "So?" She offered an awkward little wave. "Hi." Gabriel nodded once. "Miss Montgomery, I brought muffins." He looked genuinely confused. "Why?" Hazel held up a paper box. "My grandmother taught me it's rude to meet someone without bringing food." One of the bodyguards quietly looked away. His shoulders shook ever so slightly. Gabriel stared at the box for another moment before accepting it. "Thank you." It was probably the first unsolicited gift anyone had ever handed him during a business negotiation. He placed the muffins carefully on a side table. "I understand my attorney explained the arrangement. He explained enough for me to lose an entire night's sleep. Reasonable. I also Googled you." Gabriel sighed. "I imagine that was unpleasant." "Very." She folded her arms. "Most people get restaurant reviews. You get conspiracy theories." A corner of his mouth almost moved. Almost. He gestured toward a seating area. "Please." Once seated, Gabriel opened a leather folder. "For this arrangement to succeed, there are rules." Hazel immediately reached for a notepad. "I'm terrible with names. Writing helps." Gabriel began. "My grandmother's name is Sophia." Hazel wrote it down. "My uncle Matteo. My aunt Lucia. My cousin Bianca. The one trying to expose us." Hazel circled Bianca's name 3 times. "Enemy. Correct. For the weekend we met 18 months ago." She scribbled. "We became engaged 8 months later." More notes. "Our first vacation was in Tuscany." Hazel looked up. "I've never been to Italy." "You have now." She frowned. "Do fake vacations still require sunscreen?" Gabriel paused. "I suppose they do." She continued writing. He continued explaining. Family history. Important anniversaries. Business etiquette. Which relatives hugged. Which preferred handshakes. Which topics to avoid. Which names carried influence. After nearly an hour, Hazel looked at her notebook. There were pages upon pages of information. She slowly closed it. "I have terrible news." Gabriel waited. "I remembered almost none of that." Silence. Then, unexpectedly, Gabriel laughed. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just one quiet, genuine laugh that seemed to surprise him even more than it surprised Hazel. "I suspected as much." She smiled triumphantly. "Oh, good. I was worried you'd be disappointed. I adjusted my expectations 5 minutes after you offered me muffins." The atmosphere relaxed. Only slightly, but enough. Another man entered, carrying several garment bags. "A stylist," Gabriel explained. "You'll need formal clothing." Hazel stared at the dresses. "I usually wear aprons." I noticed. "They're much cheaper." Within the hour, she emerged wearing an elegant emerald green dress that complemented her figure beautifully. She stopped in front of the mirror. "Is that actually me?" The stylist smiled. It always was. Gabriel happened to look up. For perhaps the first time in years, he completely forgot the sentence he had intended to say. Hazel wasn't glamorous in the polished, magazine cover sense. She looked warm, comfortable, radiant, like someone capable of making any room feel lived in. He quickly recovered. "It suits you," she beamed. "Thank you, although I still think it needs pockets." The stylist looked horrified. Hazel shrugged. "What? Women deserve pockets." Even Gabriel couldn't argue with that. By Friday afternoon, the convoy of black SUVs rolled through the iron gates of the Santoro family estate. Hazel pressed her face against the window. "Oh, it's enormous." "It has 3 guest houses," I counted. Gabriel adjusted his cufflinks. "Try not to sound surprised." "I literally am surprised. Internally. I don't do anything internally." "I've noticed." As soon as the vehicles stopped, bodyguards exited first. Then Gabriel stepped out. He walked around the vehicle and opened Hazel's door himself. She blinked. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." He offered his hand anyway. For a brief second, she hesitated before placing her flower-softened fingers into his. His grip was steady, warm, unexpectedly gentle. Flashbulbs exploded. Family members watched from the mansion steps. The performance had begun. An elegant elderly woman hurried forward, far faster than anyone her age should have managed. "Gabriel!" Without warning, she wrapped him in a fierce embrace. His stern expression instantly softened. "My grandmother." Hazel smiled. "So this is Sophia." Before anyone could formally introduce them, Sophia turned toward Hazel. "So," she examined her from head to toe. "This is the woman who finally convinced my impossible grandson to stop working for 5 minutes." Hazel answered honestly. "I've actually been trying for 2 days." Sophia burst into delighted laughter. "I already adore her." Hazel instinctively hugged her. Not politely, not cautiously. A real hug. The courtyard fell silent. Several capos exchanged confused looks. No one, absolutely no one, hugged Sophia Santoro without permission. Sophia hugged her back, tightly. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, patting Hazel's shoulder. "You feel like family already." Gabriel closed his eyes for one brief second. This wasn't in the plan, not even remotely. Yet somehow, it was working better than anything he could have rehearsed. The introductions continued. Hazel forgot nearly every name within minutes. "I'm sorry," she admitted to one elderly uncle. "I'll probably call you the wrong thing." The man chuckled. "Then call me whatever makes you smile." "Wonderful. I'll call you Uncle Pie." "Why?" "You look trustworthy." Nobody knew what that meant. Least of all Hazel. Yet somehow, by dinner, half the family was calling him Uncle Pie. Across the room, Gabriel watched in quiet disbelief. She hadn't followed a single instruction he'd spent hours teaching her. She remembered almost none of the carefully rehearsed details. She wasn't pretending to belong. She simply treated every person she met as though they deserved kindness first. And somehow, that was becoming impossible for anyone to resist. Saturday morning arrived wrapped in golden sunlight, the sprawling Santoro estate looking less like the headquarters of one of the city's most powerful families and more like the setting of an extravagant holiday. Hazel woke before anyone else. Years of running a bakery had trained her body to greet dawn without an alarm. She quietly slipped downstairs, hoping to find coffee. Instead, she found an industrial-sized kitchen that could have supplied an entire hotel. Copper pots hung from polished racks. Marble countertops stretched farther than the bakery itself. Everything gleamed. Everything looked untouched. Hazel frowned. "No one actually cooks in here, do they?" A sleepy housekeeper chuckled. "Not unless Mrs. Sophia insists." Hazel opened cabinet after cabinet until she found flour, then butter, then eggs. Within minutes, she tied an apron around her elegant dress. "I'll just make breakfast." The aroma reached the second floor long before breakfast was announced. Fresh butter, vanilla, brown sugar, warm cinnamon. One by one, sleepy family members wandered toward the kitchen. They stopped in the doorway. Hazel stood in the center of organized chaos. Flour dust decorated her cheeks. Several mixing bowls surrounded her. She was humming happily while rolling pastry dough. Gabriel entered, just as she pulled a tray from the oven. He froze. What? He looked around the crowded kitchen. Happened. Hazel looked up innocently. Good morning. I borrowed your kitchen. It appears you conquered it. She grinned. Same difference. Grandmother Sophia sampled the first cinnamon roll. She closed her eyes dramatically. My grandson has owned this mansion for 10 years. She pointed at Gabriel. And this is the first breakfast worth waking up for. The entire kitchen erupted in laughter. Gabriel rubbed the bridge of his nose. I see I've already lost. You never had a chance, Sophia replied. By lunchtime, Hazel somehow knew the names of every cook, every gardener, every driver, and nearly every bodyguard. Not because she possessed an excellent memory, because she kept asking until she got them right. She discovered one young guard skipping meals because he didn't want to leave his post. You'll faint. I'm fine, ma'am. No. She handed him 2 sandwiches. You're hungry. He hesitated. Mr. Santoro prefers we're always ready. Hazel folded her arms. And people perform better after eating. The guard glanced nervously toward Gabriel. To everyone's surprise, Gabriel simply nodded once. Eat. Within seconds, the entire security team suddenly looked interested in lunch. One veteran bodyguard quietly whispered, I've worked here 12 years. No one's ever ordered us to take a proper break. Meanwhile, Bianca Santoro watched everything from the terrace. Every smile directed toward Hazel tightened the knot in her stomach. This wasn't supposed to happen. The fake wife should have looked uncomfortable. She should have made mistakes. She should have embarrassed Gabriel. Instead, the servants adored her. The older relatives adored her. Even the security staff smiled whenever she walked past. Bianca folded her arms. There has to be a crack, and I'm going to find it. That afternoon, the family gathered in the gardens for a birthday celebration honoring Arturo, a groundskeeper who had worked for the Santoros for nearly 40 years. Or rather, it was supposed to be a birthday celebration. Hazel noticed something strange. There were flowers, music, wine, but no birthday cake. She quietly asked one of the maids. Oh. The woman looked embarrassed. I don't think anyone remembered. Hazel blinked. The man has worked here 4 decades. The maid sighed. Everyone assumed someone else handled it. Hazel looked toward Arturo. The elderly groundskeeper laughed politely with guests. He clearly expected nothing. That somehow made it worse. Without another word, Hazel disappeared into the kitchen. 45 minutes later, conversation stopped. Hazel walked into the garden, carrying a 3-layer strawberry shortcake, decorated with fresh flowers and hand-piped frosting. The writing simply read, Thank you, Arturo. The old groundskeeper stared at the cake. His eyes immediately filled with tears. For me, Hazel smiled. Birthdays should never be forgotten. He tried to speak, couldn't. Instead, he hugged her with surprising strength. Around them, dozens of family members applauded. Even hardened capos clapped respectfully. Gabriel watched from several steps away. He wasn't looking at the cake. He was looking at Hazel. No one had instructed her to do this. There was no strategic advantage, no performance, no audience she needed to impress. She simply noticed someone who had been overlooked and quietly fixed it. For reasons he couldn't explain, his chest suddenly felt strangely tight. The emotional moment quickly turned into celebration. Music began again. Children danced across the lawn. Hazel somehow found herself teaching several young capos how to decorate cupcakes using leftover frosting. I promise, she laughed. It's impossible to ruin icing. 5 seconds later, One enormous capo accidentally launched frosting across another man's suit. Silence. Then everyone burst into laughter. Even the victim. Across the garden, Gabriel watched three men feared throughout the city, arguing over rainbow sprinkles. "This," one bodyguard muttered beside him, "is not how I imagined today." "No," Gabriel admitted, "it isn't." Later that afternoon, Gabriel's uncle Lorenzo cornered Hazel near the dessert table. "My wife says your apple pie is better than ours." Hazel gasped dramatically. "I would never confirm such dangerous allegations." "So," he leaned closer, "would you share the recipe?" She smiled. "I'll trade." "For what?" "Your family tomato sauce." Lorenzo laughed so loudly that half the guests turned around. "Done." They shook hands. Gabriel appeared almost immediately. "Lorenzo." His uncle looked amused. "Yes? We need Hazel." "For what?" Gabriel paused. He had absolutely no answer. "Family photographs." Lorenzo glanced toward the photographers. "They're not scheduled until an hour from now." Another pause. Hazel looked between them. "Oh, I'll wait." Lorenzo hid a smile. "As you wish." As they walked away, Hazel whispered, "Thank you for rescuing me." Gabriel frowned. "Rescuing you? I thought maybe you noticed I was talking too much." He looked at her in disbelief. "No, I simply—" He searched for a reasonable explanation. "Needed you elsewhere." Hazel nodded thoughtfully. "You're very committed to this fake marriage." He looked straight ahead. Apparently, by evening, wagers had quietly begun circulating among Gabriel's security team. Bodyguard Marco unfolded a small notebook. "Current betting pool." Another guard asked, "What's the question?" Marco grinned. "How long before the boss admits he's jealous?" Laughter rippled through the security room. One younger guard shook his head. "I give him another 24 hours. 12, another argued. The pie conversation nearly killed him. An older guard, who had protected Gabriel for 15 years, calmly placed a folded bill on the table. "My money says tonight. You think he'll confess?" "No. I think he'll realize it." Dinner that evening only made matters worse. Hazel was seated between Gabriel's grandfather and two younger cousins. Within minutes, she had everyone laughing over stories about disastrous baking experiments. Grandfather Enzo wiped tears from his eyes. "My dear," he smiled warmly at Hazel, "you should have married into this family years ago." The table fell silent for just a heartbeat. Hazel laughed awkwardly. "I think your grandson would have objected." Enzo glanced at Gabriel. "I'm no longer certain." Several relatives exchanged knowing smiles. Gabriel calmly reached for his wine. His expression remained perfectly controlled. Only the faint tightening around his jaw betrayed anything at all. Across the table, Bianca noticed. For the first time all weekend, she wasn't watching Hazel. She was watching Gabriel. And what she saw changed everything. He wasn't pretending anymore. That realization brought a slow, satisfied smile to her face. If he's emotionally involved, she thought, then exposing the contract will hurt far more than exposing the lie. She quietly excused herself from dinner. Tomorrow, she would end the performance once and for all. Sunday evening arrived, with all the grandeur the Santoro family could summon. Crystal chandeliers bathed the ballroom in warm, golden light. A string quartet played softly near the staircase. Long tables overflowed with flowers, polished silver, and desserts that made Hazel quietly wonder if she should have taken notes. The annual family banquet marked the final event before everyone returned to their own corners of the empire. It was also the moment Gabriel had dreaded all weekend. Not because of the speeches, not because of the business discussions, because something had changed. The original plan had been simple. Survive one weekend. Pay Hazel. Return to normal. Yet every time he imagined Monday morning, The idea of walking away from her felt strangely unbearable. Hazel stood near one of the windows, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her emerald dress. She smiled politely whenever relatives stopped to thank her. One elderly aunt pressed both of Hazel's hands. "My dear, our family hasn't laughed this much together in years." Another cousin hugged her. "You have to visit again." Hazel's smile softened. "I'd like that." The words slipped out before she remembered. She couldn't. By tomorrow, she would disappear from their lives. Across the ballroom, Bianca watched every interaction with growing satisfaction. She had spent most of the afternoon searching Gabriel's private office. She found exactly what she wanted: a copy of the legal agreement. Every signature, every payment clause, every condition. Proof. Not only that Hazel wasn't Gabriel's wife, proof that the entire family had been deceived. Bianca slipped the folder beneath her arm. It's over. Dinner progressed peacefully. Toasts were given. Stories were shared. Grandfather Enzo joked that Hazel had permanently ruined every other dessert in the city because nothing would ever compare again. Laughter filled the room. Even Gabriel smiled openly now. The sight only strengthened Bianca's resolve. When Sophia finished thanking everyone for attending, Bianca slowly rose from her chair. "I have something to say." The room quieted. She walked toward the center of the ballroom, carrying the folder. "I believe this family deserves honesty." Gabriel's expression hardened. Bianca opened the folder. "I wondered why our dear Hazel always seemed slightly uncomfortable whenever anyone asked about her marriage." She placed several documents on the table. "Now I know." Hazel's heart stopped. She recognized the contract immediately. "No." Bianca lifted the first page high enough for everyone nearby to see. "This woman," she pointed directly at Hazel, "was hired." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Several relatives looked between Gabriel and Hazel in disbelief. Bianca's voice grew louder. "She isn't Gabriel's wife. She's an actress, a paid employee. Everything this weekend has been a performance." The folder landed on the table with a sharp slap. Silence. Then murmurs. Confused whispers spread across the room. A few capos instinctively moved closer to Gabriel. Others stared at Hazel with uncertainty. No one knew what to believe. Hazel slowly stood. Her hands trembled. She could have denied everything. She could have invented another lie. Gabriel had enough influence to silence the room if he wished. Instead, she looked at Sophia, then at Arturo, then at every smiling face that had welcomed her without hesitation. They deserved better. She took one steadying breath. It's true. The whispers stopped immediately. Hazel forced herself to continue. "When Mr. Santoro's attorney came to my bakery, I agreed to pretend. My bakery was about to close. I was desperate." She swallowed hard. The agreement was real. So was the payment. A painful silence settled over the ballroom. Hazel's eyes shimmered with tears. "But," she smiled sadly, "none of your kindness was fake. You welcomed a complete stranger. You treated me like family before I earned it." She looked toward Gabriel. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to embarrass you." Then she carefully removed the wedding ring Gabriel had given her for the weekend. She placed it on the table. "Thank you," her voice nearly broke, "for letting me borrow what a real family feels like." Without waiting for an answer, Hazel turned toward the doors. Every step felt heavier than the last. Gabriel never looked at Bianca. He never looked at the contract. He watched only Hazel. The woman who had turned his guarded family into something warmer in less than 2 days. The woman who remembered servants' birthdays. Who worried whether bodyguards had eaten lunch. Who believed pockets belonged in every dress. Who had somehow walked straight through every wall he'd spent decades building around himself. She reached the ballroom doors. Gabriel stood. The movement alone silenced the room. He walked slowly toward the table where Bianca had left the contract. She smiled triumphantly. I told everyone the truth. Gabriel picked up the document. His expression remained unreadable. You did. He looked down at the pages for a long moment. Then, without warning, he tore the contract cleanly in half. Once, twice, again. Paper drifted onto the polished floor like white snow. Bianca's smile vanished. Gabriel let the pieces fall from his hand. Then he turned toward Hazel. His voice remained calm, almost gentle. She stopped being my fake wife. The room held its breath. The moment she made this family feel like one. Hazel slowly turned around. She stared at him in disbelief. Gabriel crossed the remaining distance between them. I offered you 1 weekend. A small smile touched his face. It wasn't enough. Hazel couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't even breathe properly. I've spent years believing loyalty could only be earned through fear. He shook his head. You proved me wrong. You earned it through kindness. He took both of her flower-soft hands in his. I don't want you to leave because a contract ended. I want you to stay because I'm asking. His voice softened even further. What I'd really like, he smiled, is the rest of our lives. For several long seconds, Hazel simply stared at him. Then tears rolled freely down her cheeks. A nervous laugh escaped her. So, she sniffled, does this mean I don't have to memorize your cousins' names anymore? For one heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Grandfather Enzo burst into laughter. Sophia laughed so hard she dabbed at her eyes. The cousins followed. The servants. The bodyguards. Even several stone-faced capos failed to hide their smiles. Gabriel laughed too. A full, genuine laugh. The kind no one in the room could remember hearing before. He slipped the ring gently back onto Hazel's finger. This time, he whispered. For real. Hazel answered the only way she knew how. She wrapped both arms around him. Not because they were pretending anymore. Because she didn't want to let go. 6 months later, Montgomery's bakery no longer struggled to survive. Fresh bread filled the display cases before sunrise. Customers often lined up around the corner. A framed certificate near the register proudly read, Official Dessert Partner of the Santoro Family Charity Foundation. Hazel insisted nothing important had changed. She still woke before dawn, still mixed dough herself, still remembered every regular customer's favorite pastry. Only now, there was always a tall man carrying 50-pound sacks of flour into the kitchen before anyone else arrived. Gabriel, Hazel called one Sunday morning. You know we have employees. I know. They can do this. They can. She folded her arms. Then why are you carrying flour again? He shrugged with perfect seriousness. I'm just helping. Every employee exchanged amused glances. Everyone knew the truth. The feared mafia boss happily woke before sunrise, every Sunday simply because it meant spending the morning beside his wife. Later that afternoon, the Santoro family gathered once again. This time, no one questioned whether Hazel belonged. She moved naturally through the kitchen with Sophia, laughing while teaching younger cousins how to decorate cookies. Arturo proudly showed everyone the roses Hazel had helped him plant behind the bakery. The bodyguards no longer avoided dessert. In fact, they argued over who received the last cinnamon roll. Watching from the doorway, Sophia smiled knowingly. I asked my grandson to bring home a wife. She glanced toward Gabriel, who was unsuccessfully pretending not to steal cookie dough from the mixing bowl. Instead of scolding him, Hazel gently tapped his hand with a wooden spoon. He grinned like a boy caught doing something mischievous. Sophia laughed quietly. He accidentally brought home the heart of this family. That evening, after closing the bakery, Hazel locked the front door and turned off the lights. The scent of vanilla, and fresh bread lingered in the quiet shop. Gabriel reached for her flower-covered hand. This time, there was no contract, no audience, no performance. Hazel slipped her fingers into his without hesitation. Together, they walked into the evening, leaving behind the warm glow of the little bakery that had changed both of their lives. The man who had once ruled an empire through fear now found his greatest joy in washing mixing bowls, carrying bags of flour, and laughing beside the woman who had taught him the simplest truth of all. The strongest families, the strongest empires, and the strongest hearts are never built by fear alone. They are built with laughter, loyalty, kindness, and love.